One evening, my son called to invite me for dinner, and when I arrived, I noticed an extra setting laid out at the table. One meant for my husband, who had been gone for 2 years. I asked about it, and Michael went pale before quietly saying, "Mom, there's something we never told you. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and share in the comments where you're watching from." The invitation had come that Tuesday. "Mom, join us for dinner Friday night. Just family, nothing fancy," Michael had said on the phone. His voice carried the same cautious gentleness he'd adopted ever since his father passed away. As if I were made of glass that might shatter with one wrong word. I was 63, hardly frail, though I'd learned that grief makes people tread lightly around the bereaved. I told him I'd be delighted, and I truly meant it. The farmhouse Robert and I had filled with 4 decades of laughter and noise, now echoed with absence, each room haunted by small reminders of the life we built together. The silence of widowhood is its own kind of weight. It had been 2 full years since that Wednesday morning when Robert's heart gave out while he checked the fence line in the north pasture. 2 years since I'd discovered him lying among the tall grass, gloves still on, his body stilled by the work he loved. That Friday, I reached Michael's home at 6:30, pie in hand, apple, his favorite, baked as much to keep myself occupied as to bring something sweet. The house was a cozy colonial tucked into a peaceful corner of Millbrook, Pennsylvania, the kind of neighborhood where families grow and summer evenings smell of cut grass and sprinklers. Vanessa, my daughter-in-law, opened the door. She looked as polished as always, the subtle highlights, sleek athletic wear, and that perfectly measured smile that never quite touched her eyes. "Brittany," she said, brushing the air beside my cheek in greeting. "You shouldn't have. We already have dessert." I just smiled, handing her the pie. "I wanted to," I said. The moment I stepped inside, the warm scent of roasted chicken filled the air, mingled with another aroma I couldn't immediately identify. Something faintly masculine, like cologne or aftershave. It stirred an echo of familiarity somewhere deep in my mind, but the memory dissolved before I could grasp it. "Where's Emma?" I asked, glancing around for my granddaughter. "Sleepover at Madison's," Vanessa replied smoothly. "We thought it might be nice to have an evening just for the adults." There was a faint edge beneath her pleasant tone that made me pause, though, before I could dwell on it, Michael emerged from the kitchen, drying his hands with a dish towel. "Mom, you made it," he said, and when he hugged me, I could feel the tightness in his shoulders. The kind that comes from holding something in too long. "Of course I did," I answered, pulling back to look at him closely. "Are you sure you're okay? You look worn out." "Work's been hectic," he muttered, eyes sliding away from mine. "Come on, dinner's ready." In the dining room, the table gleamed under soft candlelight. Vanessa had brought out her finest china, the cream set rimmed with gold that her mother had gifted her, and the crystal candle holders sparkled against the polished wood. Gentle classical music floated from hidden speakers, wrapping the room in an atmosphere far more elegant than our usual family meals. Then I noticed it. 4 places set at the table, 4 plates, 4 sets of silverware, 4 wine glasses glinting in the flicker of the candles. Yet there were only 3 of us. The extra setting sat at the head of the table, waiting. Robert's seat, the very spot he'd always taken at our own table. The head of the family, the protector, the man whose quiet presence once filled every corner of our lives. Seeing that place set again stole the air from my lungs. "Michael," I managed to say, though my voice sounded far calmer than the panic building inside me, "why are there 4 settings?" His face drained of color instantly, as if someone had pulled the life from it. Vanessa lifted a trembling hand to her mouth, and for a long moment, no one said a word. The classical music kept drifting through the speakers, soft and serene, a jarring contrast to the sudden heaviness that pressed down on the room. "Michael," I repeated, firmer now, "what is this?" He looked toward Vanessa, and in that silent exchange, the kind only long-married couples master, I saw hesitation flash across both their faces. She gave a slight shake of her head, but he drew in a slow breath, his expression tightening with resolve, like someone bracing for a plunge into freezing water. "Mom," he began, voice measured and deliberate, "there's something we never told you." The room seemed to sway, and I caught hold of a chair for balance. "About your father," Vanessa said softly. "Please sit down. This won't be easy." I sat, but not where I usually did. Instead, I chose the chair closest to the doorway, guided by a quiet instinct that wanted me near an escape. "Tell me," I said. Michael lowered himself into the chair opposite me, pressing his palms flat against the table, as though to steady his resolve. "Dad didn't die the way you've always believed," he said at last. "He did have a heart attack." When I finally spoke, my voice didn't sound like mine at all. Thin, distant, hollow. "In the North pasture, Dr. Morrison said it was massive," I murmured. "Instantaneous. He wouldn't have felt a thing." "That part's true," Michael said softly. "But there's more, Mom. In the months before he died, Dad was looking into something. Something that frightened him." I stared at my son. The child I'd cradled 36 years ago, whose skinned knees I'd kissed better, whose bad dreams I'd chased away, trying to make sense of his words. "What do you mean?" Vanessa suddenly rose from her chair. "I'll get the box," she said, already moving before I could respond. "What box?" I asked, but her quick steps echoed down the hall before I got an answer. Michael dragged his hands down his face, exhaling heavily. "A few weeks before he passed, Dad came to me. He was upset, more shaken than I'd ever seen him. He handed me a locked box and made me promise to keep it safe. He said if anything ever happened to him, I should wait 2 years before showing it to you." 2 years, I repeated, dazed. "Why wait? He said you'd need time, Mom. Time to grieve, to be strong enough to face whatever was in it." Vanessa returned then, holding a small wooden chest, about 8 inches square, its corners trimmed with brass and a keyhole glinting in front. She placed it gently on the table, the weight of it landing with a soft, deliberate sound. I recognized it instantly. Robert's old tackle box, the one his father had crafted for him half a century ago from dark walnut, their initials carved together on the lid. R.C. plus J.C., Robert Caldwell and James Caldwell. "This was in the basement," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I saw it last month when I was getting out the Christmas boxes." "No, Mom," Michael said quietly. "That one was a duplicate. Dad built an exact copy, same wood, same carving, and left it there so you'd think nothing was missing. He didn't want you to know this one was gone." The realization hit hard. The man I'd shared a bed with for 41 years, the man who knew every corner of my heart, had hidden something from me. My husband, my partner, my Robert, had lived with secrets I'd never imagined. He had built lies within lies, even crafting fake boxes just to keep his trail hidden. "Open it," I said quietly. "Mom, are you sure you're ready?" Michael asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Open it," I repeated, each word steady but trembling underneath. From his pocket, he pulled out a small brass key, his fingers unsteady as he fitted it into the lock. A sharp click broke the silence, and then the lid lifted with a low creak. Inside, red velvet lined a set of neat compartments, the kind you might expect in a jeweler's case. But instead of gold or gemstones, there were papers, old photographs, and sitting on top of them all, a letter. My name was scrawled across the envelope in Robert's unmistakable handwriting. "Brittany, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I'm sorry for the secrets. I'm sorry for the lies. But most of all, I'm sorry for what you're about to find out. Our life together was true. My love for you was true. But my past? That belonged to another man entirely. Burn everything in this box once you've read it. Trust no one. And whatever you do, don't let them realize you know. Your life may depend on it. R. My hand shook so hard the letter fluttered against the table. What is this supposed to mean? Who are they? I asked, looking between my son and his wife. Michael's face looked suddenly older in the candlelight, weary in a way that frightened me. I don't know, Mom, he said. Dad never explained. He only said that after 2 years, you had to learn the truth about who he was before Millbrook and why he never spoke about his family, or the money. What money? I asked, but Vanessa was already reaching into the box. She drew out a photograph and slid it across the table toward me. In it was a young man, maybe in his 20s, strikingly handsome and smiling easily, standing before an opulent mansion I had never seen in my life. He wore a finely tailored suit, his arm resting easily around a striking woman adorned with pearls. The young man in the photograph was unmistakably Robert, yet not the Robert I had known. His hair was styled with precision, his smile carried an edge of arrogance, and his whole presence radiated privilege and confidence, as if he'd belonged to a world far removed from the quiet life we'd shared. Who is she? I asked softly. We have no idea, Michael replied, but check the date on the back. I turned the photo over. In faded ink, it read, Newport, July 1982. My heart stuttered. July 1982. The same month before Robert had first appeared in Millbrook 43 years ago, behind the wheel of a battered old truck, asking around for a job on a farm. The same month before he'd walked into Harrigan's Diner, where I'd been pouring coffee and slicing pie, and asked if I knew anyone who was hiring. The month before everything began. There's more, Michael murmured, his voice barely steady. He reached into the box again and pulled out an aged newspaper clipping, so brittle it nearly crumbled in his hand. The headline made my blood run cold. Prominent Boston family heir missing, foul play suspected. I couldn't draw a full breath. The photo beside the article showed that same young man, the one from the picture, the one in the suit, but the name below it wasn't Robert Caldwell. It was James Whitmore III. Mom, Michael said, fear threading through his words. I think Dad was running away from something, or someone. And I think, he faltered, his throat tightening. I think whoever he was running from might have found him. He wore a finely tailored suit, his arm resting easily around a striking woman adorned with pearls. The young man in the photograph was unmistakably Robert, yet not the Robert I had known. His hair was styled with precision, his smile carried an edge of arrogance, and his whole presence radiated privilege and confidence, as if he'd belonged to a world far removed from the quiet life we'd shared. Who is she? I asked softly. We have no idea, Michael replied, but check the date on the back. I turned the photo over. In faded ink, it read, Newport, July 1982. My heart stuttered. July 1982. The same month before Robert had first appeared in Millbrook 43 years ago, behind the wheel of a battered old truck, asking around for a job on a farm. The same month before he'd walked into Harrigan's Diner, where I'd been pouring coffee and slicing pie, and asked if I knew anyone who was hiring. The month before everything began. There's more, Michael murmured, his voice barely steady. He reached into the box again and pulled out an aged newspaper clipping, so brittle it nearly crumbled in his hand. The headline made my blood run cold. Prominent Boston family heir missing. Foul play suspected. I couldn't draw a full breath. The photo beside the article showed that same young man, the one from the picture, the one in the suit. But the name below it wasn't Robert Caldwell. It was James Whitmore III. Mom, Michael said, fear threading through his words. I think Dad was running away from something, or someone. And I think, he faltered, his throat tightening. I think whoever he was running from might have found him. My husband had lived under a name that wasn't his, A man important enough that, even after 43 years, someone was still searching for him. A man who had lied to me every single day of our marriage. And now he was gone. And whoever he had been running from was coming for me. I didn't know who they were or what they wanted, but I knew I had to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. I drove for nearly 20 minutes before my thoughts began to settle. The farmhouse sat 40 miles from Michael's neighborhood, down narrow back roads that wound through open fields and patches of dark woods. I checked the rearview mirror over and over, watching for headlights that lingered too long or followed too close. Nothing but darkness. Now and then, a deer's eyes flashed in the beams, eerie and silent. By the time I turned into the gravel drive, my hands had stopped trembling. The old house loomed against the October night, its windows black except for the porch light I'd left glowing. A ritual from all those years Robert had worked late, and I'd waited, keeping the light on so he'd come home to warmth. Robert, or James, whatever name truly belonged to him. I sat there for a long moment, engine off, listening to the tick of the cooling car and the faraway howls of coyotes along the ridge. Then I took the wooden box from my bag, clutching it close as I stepped inside. I locked the door, slid the deadbolt into place, something I couldn't remember ever doing before. The house didn't feel like home anymore. Every shadow seemed to watch me. Every small creak of the floorboard sent a chill down my spine. After 41 years, it felt like I was living inside a stranger's walls, a place built on secrets. I brewed a pot of strong black coffee and carried it to the kitchen table, spreading out the contents of Robert's box beneath the harsh glare of the fluorescent light. The glow of candlelight and the soft hum of classical music belonged to another world. What I needed now was cold precision. The newspaper clipping bore the date August 15, 1982. I read it once, twice, then a third time, forcing every word into memory. James Whitmore III, age 26, heir to the Whitmore textile fortune, has been missing for 3 weeks. Boston police are investigating possible foul play after discovering bloodstains in his Beacon Hill apartment. Whitmore was last seen leaving the Harbor Club on July 23rd. His father, James Whitmore Jr., has offered a $100,000 reward for information leading to his son's recovery. $100,000 in 1982. That was the kind of sum that would make people keep searching for decades. I sifted through the photographs next. Robert, or James, appeared in one after another. Charity events, yacht clubs, polo fields, always sharply dressed, surrounded by elegant people who looked every bit as privileged as he did. He'd belonged to a different universe entirely, one of wealth, charm, and secrets, far removed from the quiet rhythm of Millbrook, Pennsylvania. Then my fingers brushed over a wedding announcement. The engagement of Miss Caroline Ashford Pemberton to Mr. James Whitmore III is announced by her parents, Mr. and Mrs. Reginald Pemberton of Greenwich, Connecticut. A June wedding is planned. The photo beneath the notice showed a stunning young woman with flawless features and a practiced society smile. Caroline Ashford Pemberton, not the woman in pearls from the earlier photo. Someone new, someone he had once promised to marry, someone who might still be alive, someone who might be searching for him, or for me. I was still staring at the photograph when a faint crunch of gravel snapped me back. My pulse spiked. I switched off the kitchen light and moved soundlessly toward the window, keeping behind the curtain. Outside, a dark SUV idled in the driveway, its engine humming quietly, headlights off. No door opened, no figure emerged. It just sat there, waiting. A dark silhouette lingered outside, unmoving. A silent watcher, cloaked in the night. Then my phone vibrated on the counter, its light cutting through the darkness. A message from Michael. "Mom, where are you?" Those men said they're from the estate lawyer's office. They had questions about Dad's. "Are you okay?" The estate lawyer's office at 9 p.m. on a Friday. I didn't answer. My pulse thundered as I swept the papers and photos back into the box, fingers trembling but fast. I needed to hide it. Not in the basement. Too obvious. Not my bedroom. Too personal, the first place anyone would check. The attic. The small crawl space behind the chimney where Robert used to stash old farm records and tax folders. I was halfway up the narrow attic steps when I heard the faint metallic click of a door handle turning downstairs. Someone was testing the back door. They weren't watching anymore, they were coming in. My heart slammed in my chest as I scrambled upward, pulling the folding stairs back into place and wincing at the groan of wood. The air in the attic was thick with dust and memories, decades of our life packed into cardboard boxes, holiday decorations, outgrown toys, forgotten furniture. On hands and knees, I crawled toward the chimney, pulled away the thin sheet of plywood Robert had nailed there years ago, and pushed the wooden box as far back as I could reach. The sound of shattering glass broke the silence below. They were inside. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. Footsteps creaked across the floorboards below me. 2 sets, maybe 3. Steady, deliberate, no longer bothering to hide their presence. Drawers slammed open, furniture scraped. They were searching for something. "Nothing down here," a man's voice said at last, educated, sharp, tinged with a Boston accent. "Check upstairs." The footsteps started up the stairs, slow and confident. I pressed myself flat against the rafters, praying they couldn't see where the attic stairs folded up into the ceiling. I prayed they wouldn't think to glance upward. "Bedroom's clear," another voice called. "No sign of anyone." "Her car's still here. She can't have gone far. Check the outbuildings." Their footsteps receded, and a door creaked open, then shut. Through a narrow crack between the attic boards, I saw beams of light cutting across the yard, sweeping toward the barn and the old equipment shed. I had maybe 5 minutes, if that. I climbed down as quietly as possible, heart pounding so loud it felt like a drum in my chest, and snatched my purse from the hall table. My keys, phone, and wallet were still inside. The house looked as though a tornado had torn through it. Drawers dumped, cushions upended, papers scattered across the floor. They'd searched everywhere, but they hadn't found what they came for. They didn't understand the kind of woman I was. One who'd spent 40 years running a farm, always prepared for broken machinery, storms, and emergencies. I knew how to hide what mattered. I slipped out the front door, keeping low, hugging the dark side of the house. The SUV still idled in the driveway, its engine a quiet growl. Out by the barn, flashlights flickered like fireflies as voices called back and forth. My car sat trapped behind theirs. I'd have to go on foot. The closest refuge was the Morrison farm 2 miles through the woods. Ben Morrison, Robert's oldest friend, the man who'd helped us lease our first fields, who'd brought over extra hands during harvest for years until arthritis stopped him. He was 80 now, widowed, living alone with his memories, and his collection of rifles. That thought steadied me. I started running, staying off the gravel road, following the faint deer path that wound through the trees. The shoes I'd worn for dinner, sensible but not built for the woods, slipped on roots and stones. Within minutes I'd twisted my ankle, but there was no time to stop. I pressed on, branches snapping against my arms, thorns scratching my skin. Then came the shouts behind me. They'd realized I wasn't in the barns. They knew I was running. "Fan out, she can't be far." I pushed harder, lungs burning, my ankle throbbing with each step, but I kept going, because stopping wasn't an option. The forest was nearly pitch black, the moon slipping in and out of view behind the thick canopy above. I'd walked this trail countless times in daylight, but under the weight of darkness, every tree looked identical, every patch of shadow waiting to trip me. A sudden beam of light swept across the trees to my right, too close. I dropped behind a fallen log, pressing myself flat against the damp earth, willing my body to disappear into the ground. The beam skimmed over me, paused, then swung back. Footsteps crunched on twigs, slow and deliberate. "I've got movement, Sector 3. a man's voice said into a radio. Pursuing. The sound of boots grew louder until I could make out his shape. Tall, broad-shouldered, a flashlight in one hand and something else glinting faintly in the other. A gun, maybe. Or a phone. Either way, danger. I scooped up a handful of dirt and small stones and flung it hard to my left, toward the ravine opposite the direction of Morrison's farm. The man jerked toward the noise, flashlight beams slicing through the trees. That was my chance. I sprang up and ran in the opposite direction. "There!" he shouted. "She's running!" But I already had a lead, and I knew these woods better than anyone. I veered off the main path, forcing my way through a narrow track half hidden by undergrowth. Thorns tore at my sleeves, branches scratched my arms, but I didn't dare slow. Then, through the trees, a faint amber glow appeared. The security light at Ben Morrison's place. Relief and adrenaline tangled in my chest. I broke through the edge of the woods into his backyard just as lights flicked on inside the house. The back door swung open and there stood Ben, shotgun raised, pajamas rumpled beneath an old bathrobe. "Brittany!" he barked, voice sharp with alarm. "What in God's name?" "Ben, please," I gasped, stumbling toward him, my ankle throbbing with every step. "I need help," I panted. "There are men after me. They broke into my house." Ben didn't waste a second. He'd served in Vietnam, seen things no one should, and he recognized the look of real fear when he saw it. "Inside." Now he ordered. I stumbled past him into the kitchen, and he shut the door fast, locking it and killing the lights. We stood there in the darkness, both of us catching our breath, the faint glow from the yard spilling through the curtains. He glanced out the window. "How many?" he asked, voice low and steady. "3, maybe 4, I said. "They're in a dark SUV. Ben, they're not just thieves. They're after something specific." "Something to do with Robert?" he asked quietly. The question hit me like a slap. "What do you know?" In the dim halo of the security light outside, I saw his jaw tighten. "Robert and I talked some near the end," he said. He was worried. "Told me that if anything ever happened to him, you might need protection." "He told you?" My chest constricted. "You knew he was lying about who he was." Ben's eyes held mine, steady but regretful. "I knew he had a past he didn't want dug up," he said slowly. "Didn't seem my place to pry. A man's entitled to his secrets, but he made me promise. If trouble ever showed up, I'd see to it you got out safe." A flashlight beam suddenly sliced through the darkness outside, gliding over the yard. "They're here," I whispered. Ben moved closer to the window, shotgun raised, body rigid with focus. "My truck's in the garage," he said. "Keys are in it. Go out the front, take the truck, and drive straight to town, to the police station." "Ben, I can't leave you." He cut me off with a grim half-smile. "I'm an old man with a loaded gun on my own property, and they're trespassing. You think I can't handle a few city boys?" He nodded toward the door. "Go on now." "Someone's got to bring Sheriff Patterson out here." "And Brittany?" Ben said, his voice softer now. I turned to him, and in his eyes I saw something I hadn't before. The soldier he used to be, the man who'd walked through hell and somehow made it back alive, carrying every ghost with him. "Robert loved you," he said quietly. Whatever else he lied about, that part was true. "He told me himself right before he passed. Said you were the only real thing in his whole damn life." Tears burned behind my eyes, but I didn't have time to let them fall. "Thank you," I managed. "The front door's open," he said briskly. "Garage is attached. You've got 3 minutes head start. Then I'm calling the law and making some noise of my own." I gripped his arm in gratitude, then ran. Through the darkened house, into the garage, and straight for the old Ford pickup parked inside. The engine roared to life, and I backed out fast, keeping the headlights off as I tore down the gravel drive, guided only by the pale silver light of the moon. In the rearview mirror, I saw flashlights cutting through the darkness, converging on Ben's house. Then came the sharp, unmistakable crack of a shotgun. I prayed it was just a warning, not something worse. I flicked on the headlights and pushed the truck faster along the winding back roads, aiming for town, for the police station, for safety. My phone buzzed on the seat beside me, an unknown number glowing on the screen. Against all reason, I answered. "Mrs. Caldwell," a woman's voice said, crisp, cool, polished. Or should I say, "Mrs. Whitmore." My heart froze. "We need to talk," she continued evenly, "about your late husband, about the money he stole, and about the very serious trouble you're in unless you cooperate." "Who is this?" I asked, my voice barely steady. "Someone who's been searching for James Whitmore for 43 years, she said. "Someone who's owed answers, someone who's out of patience." Then the line went dead. I stared at the phone trembling in my hand, the road stretching ahead like an endless dark ribbon, and the truth sank in with bone-deep certainty. This wasn't the end of anything. It was only the beginning. They knew my name. They knew Robert's past. And they knew I had something they were desperate to reclaim. The only thing I didn't know was how far I'd go to stay alive. I didn't drive to the police station. Everything about that phone call, the woman's calm authority, the icy confidence in her tone, the way she'd said cooperate, told me that bringing in the local police would be a mistake. Whoever these people were, they had reach, power, and patience. They'd been hunting for 43 years. A small-town sheriff accustomed to livestock disputes wouldn't stand a chance against them. Instead, I turned the truck toward the Millbrook Public Library. It was closed at that hour, well past 10 on a Friday night. But I knew the code to the side entrance. I'd spent 15 years on the library board, raising funds for renovations, running children's programs, shelving books when volunteers were short. Martha Hendricks, the head librarian, had once shared the security code with me, just in case. This definitely counted. I parked Ben's truck behind the building, hidden from the streetlights, and slipped in through the back door. The library was shrouded in darkness, the only light coming from the glowing green exit signs that cast long, uneasy shadows between the shelves. Libraries had always been my refuge, the smell of old paper and the quiet promise that somewhere in those stacks lay every answer imaginable. But tonight, it felt less like a sanctuary and more like a tomb. I made my way to the computer area, keeping to the shadows, and woke one of the public terminals. My fingers shook as I typed, "James Whitmore III, Boston missing 1982. Instantly, results filled the screen. Dozens of headlines from the Boston Globe, the Herald, even the New York Times. I began to read, the pieces fitting together with chilling clarity. The Whitmores had been one of Boston's oldest and wealthiest families, generations of textile magnates and political influence reaching back to the Revolutionary War. James Whitmore III, their only son, had been the golden boy. Harvard graduate, heir apparent to the family fortune, poised to take over the empire until he vanished. He'd been engaged to Caroline Ashford Pemberton, daughter of another storied Boston lineage, their society wedding planned for June 1983. But in July 1982, he disappeared after leaving the Harbor Club, an exclusive haven for the city's elite. When police entered his Beacon Hill apartment, they found chaos. Blood on the carpet, signs of a violent struggle. No witnesses, no body, no suspects. The Whitmores had poured their fortune into finding him, hiring private investigators, offering massive rewards, even consulting psychics. But James Whitmore III had simply ceased to exist. In the end, they'd held a memorial and declared him legally dead. But clearly, someone had never stopped searching. I typed Caroline Ashford Pemberton into the search bar. A newer article popped up, one from just 5 years earlier. Boston philanthropist Caroline Pemberton Ashcroft donates $5 million to Children's Hospital. She'd remarried, taking her new husband's name but keeping her own, the way women of her class often did. The photo showed her as she was now, a poised woman in her 60s, silver hair elegantly styled, pearls resting at her throat, her expression polished but cold, the kind of woman who didn't forgive easily. I was still staring at the screen when I heard the faint click of the front door opening. Almost didn't hear it. I shut off the monitor instantly and ducked behind the circulation desk, my body pressed against the cold linoleum floor. My heart pounded so violently I was sure it echoed through the silent library. Footsteps followed, steady, deliberate, the stride of someone who knew exactly where they were going. "Mrs. Caldwell?" A man's voice, unfamiliar, younger than the others I'd heard earlier, with a trace of Brooklyn in his accent. "I know you're here." The truck outside kind of gives it away. He paused. "We're not here to hurt you," he said. "We just want to talk." I didn't move. "My name's Daniel Torres," he went on. "I'm a private investigator." The Whitmore family hired me to find James, to find out what really happened to him. Another pause. Then, softer. "I get that you're scared. This must be a lot to take in, but I'm not your enemy." His footsteps drew closer, careful, unhurried. "I've been on this case for 3 years," he continued. "The family brought me in after the first investigator died. 73 years old, worked it till the end. That's the kind of pull James Whitmore had. Even after he disappeared, they couldn't let him go." He was right next to the desk now. I could see his shadow stretching across the floor, his legs outlined beneath the narrow gap in the counter. "Here's what I think happened," Torres said, his voice steady but low. "James found out something he shouldn't have, something tied to the family business, something criminal or at least dirty enough to destroy them if it ever came out. He tried to do the right thing, maybe threatened to expose it, and they came after him for it." I stayed still, hardly breathing. "But he survived," Torres went on. "He was clever, resourceful. He disappeared, built a new life under a new name, stayed hidden for 43 years. That takes a certain kind of willpower. And love. The kind of love that makes a man give up everything he's ever known for a chance to live something honest. In spite of myself, in spite of the fear, the exhaustion, the shock, tears welled up and slipped silently down my cheeks. "The real question," Torres said, his tone softening, "is what he took with him when he ran. What proof did he have? Because someone, somewhere, is desperate to make sure that proof never sees the light of day. And those people, the ones who broke into your house tonight, they're not like me. They're not after truth. They're after silence." He crouched down then, and I flinched, but when I looked through the narrow opening beneath the desk, I saw his face, younger than I'd expected, maybe 40, eyes dark and steady, and full of something that looked like understanding. "Please," he said gently, "let me help you." "Before they find you again," something in his tone, or maybe in those eyes, broke through my terror. Maybe I was making a terrible mistake, but sitting there in the dark, hunted and alone, I made my choice. I decided to trust him. I rose slowly, keeping my hands where he could see them. He stood too, and I saw he was holding only a phone, not a gun. "Thank you," he said quietly. "That took guts." "How did you even know I'd be here?" I asked. "I've been watching you for 3 weeks, Mrs. Caldwell," he said without hesitation. "Learning your routine. You come to the library every Tuesday. You volunteer for the literacy program, and when you're anxious, you come here to read." It felt like the safest bet. 3 weeks? I echoed, the realization hitting hard. "You've been following me since before any of this happened?" "I had to be sure," he said. "I needed to know you weren't part of whatever James was running from." "That you were innocent," Torres finished quietly, slipping his phone into his pocket. "And you are." "You had no idea who he really was." "No," I said bitterly. "I had no idea my entire marriage was built on a lie." "It wasn't," he countered, his tone suddenly firm. "I've read everything, every report, every interview, every piece of evidence ever written about James Whitmore III. He was plenty of things. Entitled, impulsive, even reckless. But he wasn't a good liar. He couldn't have pretended to love someone for 41 years. Whatever else he was, he loved you, Mrs. Caldwell. I'm sure of that. Then why did he lie? I asked quietly. To protect you, Torres said. Whatever he discovered, whatever he had, it was dangerous. The kind of truth people kill to bury, and clearly they still are. I sank into one of the library's old wooden chairs, the weight of exhaustion pressing down. There's a box, I said finally, documents, photos, letters. He left it for me with Michael, told him to give it to me 2 years after he died. Torres's expression sharpened, his whole posture shifting. Where is it now? Hidden, somewhere safe. I need to see it. I met his gaze. Why should I trust you? You just said there are people out there who'll do anything to erase that evidence. How do I know you're not one of them? You don't, he admitted simply. But think about this. If I meant you harm, I could have done it weeks ago. I could have walked into your house one night and you'd never have known. If I wanted to destroy the box, I could have burned the whole place down while you slept. But I didn't. He paused, looking suddenly older, wearier. I'm here because I want the truth. And because... He hesitated, then added, because my uncle was Carlos Torres. The investigator, I murmured. He nodded. He was the first one the Whitmores hired after James vanished. He devoted 30 years to finding him, and it consumed him. He died thinking he'd failed, believing James Whitmore was buried in some unmarked grave. I can't let that be his ending. I have to finish what he started. I took over the case to finish what he started, Torres said quietly, to give him peace, even if he's gone. There was a depth in his voice I hadn't heard before, something raw, sorrow, woven with resolve, the kind of ache born from carrying someone else's unfinished story. I understood it instantly, that hunger for closure, that desperate need to make sense of what was lost. The woman who called me, I said, she claimed Robert, or James, stole money. Is that true? Torres's expression darkened. That's what his father said. $20 million vanished from the family's accounts just before James disappeared. My stomach turned. So he did take it. No, Torres said firmly. I've seen the ledgers myself. That money wasn't stolen. It was moved, intentionally, quietly, over about 6 months leading up to when he vanished. Moved? James wasn't running because of theft, Torres explained. He was tracking something, documenting it, following the trail. Following what? Money laundering, he said flatly. The Whitmore textile empire was just a shell. It was being used to clean dirty money for people you don't cross. Old money, organized, powerful. James discovered it, and he started collecting proof. That $20 million wasn't his to steal. He redirected it into traceable accounts. He was building a case. I felt it hit me like a slow, heavy weight. Every strange habit, every late-night worry Robert had carried in silence, suddenly taking on a terrifying logic. And then they came for him, I whispered. Torres nodded. Yes, but he got away, and he took whatever evidence he had with him. My mind went to the wooden box still buried behind the chimney, the papers, the photos, the letter. Robert's warning echoed in my memory. Trust no one. If what you're saying is true, I said slowly, then that box is not just important. It's dangerous. Torres met my eyes, deadly. After 43 years, the people tied to that money, the ones who built their fortunes on it, some of them are still alive, and they'll do anything to make sure it stays buried. Still powerful, Torres said grimly, still with everything to lose. He leaned closer, his tone urgent now. Mrs. Caldwell, Brittany, I can protect you, but only if you let me. Before I could reply, my phone vibrated on the table. A message from Michael flashed across the screen. "Mom, please call me. Vanessa's in the hospital. They hurt her." The world seemed to tilt sideways. "What?" I whispered. Torres caught the change in my face instantly. "What happened?" I handed him the phone, my fingers shaking. He scanned the message, jaw tightening. "They're escalating," he muttered, "trying to use your family as leverage." He pulled out his own phone, typing quickly. "I'm calling in backup. People I trust." "We need to secure your son and your granddaughter, Emma," I breathed. "She's at a sleepover." "Madison's house. Do you know where?" I nodded, my mind spinning. Vanessa. Hurt. Maybe worse. But something didn't add up. Why her? Why not Michael? Unless Michael wasn't safe either, unless that text wasn't from him at all. "Wait," I said sharply, grabbing Torres's arm. "Don't text back. Call the number. If it's really my son, he'll answer. If it's not..." Torres's eyes widened slightly, understanding. He pressed the call button and switched to speaker. The line rang once, twice, 3, 4 times. And then a woman's voice came through. That same voice, smooth, cultured, icy. "Mrs. Caldwell," she said, almost purring, "how nice of you to get in touch." I froze. "Your son is fine, by the way. For now. As is your daughter-in-law, but my patience is wearing thin." My pulse thundered, but my voice came out steady. "What do you want?" "I want," she said, her tone turning sharp as glass, "what James stole from my family. She demanded the papers he'd used to betray her family, and she wanted them within 12 hours, or she warned, people I loved would begin to die." A beat of silence, then the question, "Do we understand each other?" I asked who she was. Her answer was edged with contempt. "Someone you should have met a long time ago, someone who was supposed to be family." The voice poured poison into the line. "I'm Caroline Pemberton Ashcroft, James's fiancée." The woman he abandoned without explanation, without closure, without dignity. The woman who spent 43 years wondering why. My chest tightened. "You're behind this? The break-ins, the threats?" I demanded. "I'm behind finding the truth," she said. "Whatever it takes." Her tone hardened. 12 hours, Mrs. Caldwell. The documents for your family's safety. I'll be in touch with location details." Then the call cut off. In the low light of the library, Torres and I sat frozen, both taking in what we'd just heard. "She isn't working for the people laundering the money," I said at last, realization spreading through me. "She isn't on their side." "She's against them," Torres replied. "Revenge or justice. Depends how you look at it. Either way, she holds my family hostage, and she's demanding proof that could topple very powerful people." I pushed to my feet. The choice was clear. We need that box. Now. "Before anyone else is harmed, it's at your farm?" he asked. "Yes." "That's their first stop," he warned. "They may already be there." "Then we'll have to outthink them," I said, meeting his gaze. "You said you wanted the truth." "This is it." He looked back at me with a sober warning. "But know this. Once we unseal that box and learn what Robert James protected for 43 years, we cross a line. There's no turning back. People will die. Maybe us included," I said. Torres gave a thin, humorless smile. "Lady, I've been chasing ghosts for 3 years. I'm ready for some real answers. Then let's go get them." We slipped out the library's back door into the chill October air, and as the night closed around us, I felt something settle deep in my chest. A realization that the woman I had been no longer existed. The gentle widow who baked pies, read to children, and moved softly through grief had been replaced by someone colder, sharper. Someone who'd spent 41 years beside a man who had outwitted some of the most dangerous people alive. Someone who had learned more from him than she'd ever realized. The hunted had become the hunter, and I was done running. We approached the farm from the east, cutting through the Hendersons' fields, land I'd crossed since my children were small. Torres drove Ben's truck with the headlights off, steering by moonlight, while I sat beside him, mapping our route in my head like a commander planning a siege. Midnight crept closer. Caroline's deadline, 12 hours, meant I had until noon, but time wasn't our only enemy. 2 vehicles in your driveway, Torres said, lifting binoculars. A black SUV and a sedan. At least 4 people, maybe more. They're not even trying to stay hidden. Why should they? I said bitterly. They've already won. They've got leverage. My family. They know I'll come back, will you? I met his gaze. I'm here, aren't I? We parked half a mile out, tucking the truck behind the Hendersons' machinery shed, then crept through the woods toward the farmhouse. My ankle ached where I'd twisted it earlier, but I ignored the pain. Pain was information, proof I was still alive. The house blazed against the night, every window glowing. They wanted me to see it, to know they owned what used to be mine. Through the kitchen window, figures moved in silhouette, searching, dismantling, tearing apart the pieces of my life. The attic, I whispered. The box is hidden behind the chimney crawl space, but we can't go in through the house, not with them inside. Is there another way? Torres whispered. I thought for a moment, tracing the layout of the farmhouse in my mind. Every addition, every repair Robert and I had made through the years. I knew that house like I knew my own skin. The roof, I said finally. There's an access panel on the north side that opens straight into the attic. Robert installed it about 15 years ago when we had a squirrel problem. He wanted to be able to check the rafters without going through the house. Torres arched a brow. Can you climb? I'm 63, not dead, I murmured. That drew a brief, tight smile from him. Fair enough. Let's move. We swung wide around the property, keeping to the trees, where the moonlight barely touched the ground. On the north side, the farmhouse loomed above us, the wall partly hidden by a tangle of overgrown climbing roses. Behind the thorny trellis, the old metal ladder Robert had bolted into the siding still waited, rusted but sturdy. The thorns were thick and wicked, but they gave us cover. We crept forward, careful not to break any branches, and I started to climb. The metal was cold and rough beneath my palms, the thorns scraping my arms as I went. Torres climbed behind me, one hand hovering near my ankle to steady me each time the ladder groaned under our combined weight. At the top, I felt for the panel. The hinges were stiff from years of neglect, and for one terrifying second, I thought they might not budge. Then, with a reluctant creak, the wood shifted. I pushed it open and hauled myself into the blackness of the attic. Torres followed, pulling the panel shut behind him. We lay still, letting the silence settle. Below us, floorboards whispered under slow-moving feet. Voices murmured indistinct. Then someone laughed, a short, easy sound that didn't belong in my house. The wrongness of it chilled me to the bone. How long do you need? Torres breathed beside me. 2 minutes. I began crawling through the darkness, my hands brushing over the relics of a lifetime. The boxes of Christmas ornaments, the trunk of Emma's baby clothes, the stack of Robert's old farm journals I'd never been able to throw out. Everything was where I'd left it, except the plywood over the crawl space. It had been moved. The plywood had shifted just a few inches, but enough. My pulse stuttered. Someone had already been here. Someone had found the hiding place. I shoved my arm into the crawl space anyway, groping through dust and insulation, praying I was wrong. My fingers met nothing but empty air. The box was gone. Torres, I whispered, my voice trembling. It's not here. He crawled over, checking for himself, his face turning grim in the faint silver light that seeped through the vents. They found it. No, I said quickly, shaking my head. Not them. The thought struck like a punch to the gut. They're still searching. If they'd found it, they wouldn't still be here tearing the house apart. Then who? A board creaked directly beneath us. We froze. "Check the attic again," a man's voice ordered below. "She knows this place too well. If she hid something valuable, it'll be somewhere she can reach without anyone noticing." The sound of footsteps on the stairs followed, slow, deliberate, coming closer. Torres and I locked eyes. In the dim light, I saw my own terror mirrored in his expression. We were cornered. The access panel was our only way out, but climbing down would take precious seconds. Too loud, too exposed. We'd never make it. The folding stairs groaned open, metal scraping against wood. I grabbed Torres's arm and pulled him toward the farthest corner, where the roof dipped low and the clutter was thick. Old furniture, broken lamps, forgotten boxes from decades of life. We crawled behind it, pressing ourselves flat to the floor as flashlight beams swept across the attic. "Nothing but junk up here," one man said, his light slicing past so close it brushed my sleeve with its glare. "She's not dumb enough to leave anything out in the open." "Keep looking anyway," another replied. "The boss wants this place stripped clean." Two of them now, methodically searching, their beams cutting through the darkness in slow, deliberate arcs. It was only a matter of time before one of them spotted us, and then my phone rang. Not a buzz, not a vibration. It rang. Michael's ringtone, bright, cheerful, piercing, exploded through the silence like a gunshot. Everything happened at once. The flashlight whipped toward us. Torres surged forward, slamming into the nearest man and knocking him backward into a pile of boxes. They hit the floor hard, a crash echoing through the attic. My phone was still ringing, that bright, relentless tone cutting through the darkness, broadcasting our location like a siren. The second man lunged and caught my ankle, jerking me off balance. My skull hit a beam with a sickening crack, stars bursting behind my eyes. Sound blurred, the scuffle of boots, Torres grunting in pain, fists landing with dull, wet thuds, someone shouting orders from below. I kicked backward, catching the man square in the ribs. He cursed, his grip loosening just enough for me to crawl forward. I grabbed the access panel, shoved it open, and swung my legs over the edge. "Brittany, go!" Torres shouted somewhere above me. I didn't hesitate. I dropped the last 6 feet, crashing into the tangle of rose bushes below. Thorns ripped through my sleeves, slicing my skin, but adrenaline numbed the sting. Behind me, I heard the chaos. Footsteps pounding, voices barking orders, the scrape of the ladder as someone started to follow. I ran, across the yard, past the barn, through the stubbled remains of the cornfield. The cold air burned my lungs, each breath sharp and ragged. My head throbbed where I'd hit it, but the only thought pounding in my skull was, don't stop, because stopping meant they'd catch me. And if they caught me, they'd realize I didn't have what they wanted. And if I was no longer useful, I was dead. I'd barely made it 200 yards when the darkness ahead exploded into white light. Headlights flared across the field, blinding me. A car idled just ahead, its engine humming, one door open. A figure stood beside it. "Mrs. Caldwell," a woman's voice called, familiar but not the icy tone from the phone. "Please stop running. I'm not here to hurt you." I slowed, chest heaving, every nerve screaming between fight and collapse. She stepped into the glow, mid-30s, neatly dressed despite the hour, her dark hair pulled back into a precise bun. She looked like she belonged in a courtroom, not a midnight chase. And in her hands, Robert's wooden box. "My name is Jennifer Matsumoto," she said evenly, as though this were some polite introduction instead of the end of the world. "I'm an attorney with Blackstone and Associates," she said evenly. "I've served as executor of your husband's estate for the past 2 years, and we need to talk." Behind me, voices rose, shouts, orders, the sound of men fanning out through the fields. They'd lost me in the dark, but not for long. "Get in the car," Jennifer said sharply. "Now, before they see you." For one breath, I hesitated, torn between instinct and fear, wondering if this was another trick, another layer in Robert's endless web of secrets. But the box in her hands was real. She'd had it for 2 years, which meant he had trusted her with it, had planned for this moment. I climbed in. Jennifer slid behind the wheel and hit the accelerator, steering across the uneven ground with the headlights still off, guiding the car by nothing but moonlight and sheer control. Within seconds, we were back on the narrow road leading away from the farm. Only then did she flick the headlights on. "Torres," I gasped. "Daniel Torres, he's still there. They'll kill him." "Mr. Torres can handle himself," Jennifer replied, eyes fixed on the road. "Former military. Former FBI. Your husband chose him for a reason." "What?" I stared at her. "No, that's not possible. Torres said he was hired by the Whitmore family." Jennifer shook her head. "He lied. Your husband hired him 3 years ago, before his death. Torres was brought in to investigate the people still hunting him, to assess the threat, and to protect you when the time came. Everything he told you tonight, it was to earn your trust, to keep you alive." My mind reeled. But he said his uncle. He said his uncle was the first investigator. "That's true," she said. "But his uncle wasn't working for the Whitmores either. He was working for your husband. 30 years ago, Robert hired Carlos Torres to keep watch, to warn him if anyone got too close. When Carlos died, Daniel took over. He's been guarding you for years, Mrs. Caldwell. Long before you realized you needed guarding." I stared at her, words slipping away. "Then who are you, really?" Jennifer glanced at me, her face calm but unyielding. "Exactly who I said I am." "An attorney," Jennifer said, her tone steady. "But I'm also the person your husband trusted with the one thing that mattered most, the truth." She glanced over, her expression softening just a fraction. "He loved you deeply, Mrs. Caldwell. Everything he did, every lie, every secret, every layer of caution, it was all to keep you safe." "Safe from who?" I asked, my voice low. "From everyone," she said simply. "The ones who wanted him dead. The ones who wanted what he'd uncovered, even his own family." She hesitated, then added quietly, "Especially his own family." "Caroline Pemberton Ashcroft," I said, the name tasting bitter in my mouth. Jennifer nodded. "Among others. But Caroline is the most dangerous, because she's not driven by greed or fear. She's driven by anger, by betrayal, by 43 years of unanswered questions. She's been building toward this moment her entire life." The car curved onto the highway, the night opening wide around us as we headed north. "She won't stop," Jennifer continued, "not until she gets what she's after." "And what's that?" "The total destruction of the Whitmore legacy," Jennifer said. "And she'll burn everything and everyone to make it happen." My phone buzzed. I looked down. Another message from Michael's number. "Mom, I know you're reading this. They said if you don't hand over the documents by dawn, they'll kill Emma. Please, I'm begging you, give them what they want." Dawn. The word punched the air out of me. "They've moved up the timeline," I whispered, staring at the screen. "They have my granddaughter." My voice sounded foreign to my own ears, thin, hollow, almost detached, as if I'd already stepped outside of myself. "No," Jennifer said firmly. "They have your son. They have your daughter-in-law. But your granddaughter is safe." I turned toward her, disbelief breaking through my panic. "Safe? How could you possibly know that?" "I have people watching her," Jennifer replied, her voice even but unyielding. "They've been in place since this started. She's still at her friend's house, happy, unaware, and she's protected by 2 operatives posing as the friend's parents. No one will touch her." "How?" I whispered. "Because your husband planned for everything, Mrs. Caldwell. Every threat, every variable, every scenario he could imagine." She glanced at the wooden box resting on the back seat. "He left instructions for all of it, including when, how, and why you'd finally learn the truth." "Then tell me," I said. "Tell me everything." "Not yet," she said quietly. "First, we get somewhere secure, somewhere they can't reach us. Then we open the box together, and you'll see what he spent his entire life protecting." I stared at the box, the weight of 43 years of secrets pressing down. "My family," I said. "They'll release them once they realize I have what they want." "They'll think they have the advantage," Jennifer said, "but Caroline doesn't know the truth. She believes the box holds evidence only against the Whitmores. She doesn't realize what your husband uncovered before he disappeared." She met my gaze in the rearview mirror, her eyes sharp and unwavering. "She doesn't know the evidence implicates the Pembertons, her own family." I felt the words hit like a physical blow. "Her family?" "Yes," Jennifer said. "They weren't just tied to the laundering operation. They ran it. The Pembertons used Whitmore Textiles as their front. When your husband discovered that, they were the ones who tried to silence him. They've been hunting him ever since." My breath caught as the pieces rearranged themselves, forming a truth more terrible than I'd imagined. "Caroline doesn't know," I whispered. "She thinks her family were victims." "That James betrayed them," Jennifer nodded once. "Exactly." But the truth is the opposite. They're the architects of everything that destroyed him. And when Caroline learns what's really in that box, it won't just ruin her. It'll destroy everything she spent her life believing. "The question is," Jennifer said quietly, her eyes fixed on the road ahead, "are you willing to use it? That box isn't just evidence, it's a weapon. Are you ready to wield it?" I thought of Emma, her laughter, her innocence, of Michael and Vanessa, bleeding and terrified somewhere I couldn't reach. I thought of Robert, buried in the cold ground, his lies sealed beneath the earth, while I grieved for a man I'd never truly known. And I thought of the woman I'd been only a day ago, the quiet widow who baked pies, read bedtime stories, and believed her life's dangers were behind her. That woman was gone. "Yes," I said, "I'm willing." Jennifer nodded, the faintest shadow of approval crossing her face. "Good. Because it's going to get worse before it gets better, and you're going to have to be stronger than you've ever been." "Where are we going?" I asked. "To a place your husband prepared," she said. "A safe house, stocked, fortified, completely off the grid. He bought it 15 years ago under a false name. No one else ever knew it existed." She gave a tight, grim smile. "Not even you." "More secrets," I murmured. "The kind that kept you alive," she replied. We drove the rest of the way in silence, Millbrook fading behind us, the night growing darker, wilder. After about 20 minutes, Jennifer turned off onto a narrow dirt road that twisted through thick forest. The path ended in front of a small, unassuming cabin tucked deep among the trees, invisible to anyone who didn't know it was there. She parked behind the cabin and shut off the engine. "We'll be safe here." For a while, at least inside, the space was plain but purposeful. One room with a sturdy bed, a table, a small kitchenette. No clutter, no comforts, just what was necessary. Jennifer set the wooden box on the table with care, then pulled out her phone. "First things first," she said. "We need to let them know you're alive and unharmed, that you're open to negotiation. I'm going to record a short video and we'll send it to Caroline." "What do I say?" "The truth," Jennifer replied. "That you have the documents. That you're willing to trade for your family's safety," Jennifer said, setting up her phone on a stack of books to steady it. "But you demand proof of life first, a video of Michael and Vanessa, and confirmation that Emma is unharmed. And Brittany—" She met my eyes, her voice tightening. "You can't look terrified, not broken. She needs to see strength, control. You're negotiating, not pleading." I drew in a deep breath and squared my shoulders, forcing my spine straight. The reflection staring back from the phone's screen startled me. A woman with tangled hair, streaked blood, scratches along her face and arms, and eyes that had lost all softness. Cold, determined, unyielding. "Record," I said. Jennifer hit the button. "Mrs. Pemberton Ashcroft," I began, my voice level, each word deliberate. "I have what you want. All of it. Every document, every photograph, every piece of evidence my husband gathered." I paused just long enough for the weight of the words to settle before continuing. "I'm willing to discuss an exchange. But first, you're going to prove my family is alive and unharmed. You have 2 hours. After that, I start releasing copies of these materials to the FBI, the SEC, and the Boston Globe. Your move." Jennifer stopped recording and, without hesitation, sent the file. The whoosh of the message leaving her phone sounded final. "Now what?" I asked. "Now," she said, turning back to the table. "We open the box, and I show you exactly what you're negotiating with." From her pocket, Jennifer produced a small brass key, the same one Michael had used when I'd first seen the box. She fitted it into the lock and turned it. The lid lifted with a soft metallic click. But what lay inside wasn't the same. The contents were organized now, neatly arranged and complete, far more extensive than what I remembered. "The box your son gave you was only a signal," Jennifer said evenly, "a way to draw you in, to prepare you. The real file, the full dossier, has been with me all along under your husband's instructions." She reached inside and pulled out a leather-bound ledger, thick and heavy, the paper inside yellowed but intact. Each page was covered in Robert's precise handwriting. Dates, account numbers, transactions, and names. "What Michael showed you," she continued, "was the first layer. The photographs, the articles, the letter. Those were meant to ease you toward the truth. But this..." She laid her hand on the ledger. "This is the truth itself." "This is what they're really after," Jennifer said. I opened the ledger and began to read, and with every line, every page, I finally understood. Why Robert had run, why he'd buried his identity, why he'd built a life out of lies and half-truths, and why, in the end, he'd chosen secrecy over trust. He hadn't been protecting himself. He'd been protecting me. The ledger was staggering in its precision. 43 years of transactions, cross-reference dates, names, account numbers, a meticulous archive of corruption. It traced the entire Pemberton operation, how Whitmore Textiles had been used as a shell for laundering money tied to drug cartels, arms traffickers, and politicians whose names still carried power. It was a complete anatomy of greed and rot, a map of the empire my husband had spent his life dismantling from the shadows. But the worst revelation came from Jennifer's quiet voice. "Page 73, she said. "That's the one that changes everything." My hands trembled as I flipped through the brittle pages until I reached it. A single entry, dated July 15th, 1982. $20 million transferred from Whitmore accounts to an offshore bank in the Cayman Islands. Beside it, in Robert's familiar, careful handwriting, were 3 words that turned my blood cold. "Payment received. CAP, Caroline Ashford Pemberton." "She wasn't a victim," I whispered. "No," Jennifer said. "She was the architect." Her voice was steady, but her eyes burned with restrained fury. "Your husband uncovered that Caroline had been running the operation for years, laundering dirty money through her father's company and using the Whitmore name as her shield. When James confronted her, she ordered the hit. She made it look like a kidnapping gone wrong, but she underestimated him. He survived," I murmured, feeling the weight of the truth settle over me. "He did more than survive," Jennifer said. "He took everything she feared, the evidence, the proof, and the money she used to build her empire. That $20 million wasn't stolen. It was moved, locked away in accounts she could never touch. And those accounts were wired with a trigger. If anything happened to him, the funds and the files would go straight to federal authorities." "A dead man's switch," I said softly. Jennifer nodded. "Exactly." He built his own justice, one that would outlive him. Jennifer unfolded another sheet of paper. A legal contract, its edges brittle, its ink faded with time. He was going to testify, she said quietly. He had a meeting set with federal prosecutors on August 1st, 1982, but Caroline found out. She sent men to his apartment the night before. He barely got out alive. I stared down at the document, at the neat signature at the bottom, James Whitmore III, and tried to reconcile that name with the man who had held my hand through childbirth, who'd taught me how to stake tomato vines, who'd slow danced with me in the kitchen every June. The two men refused to exist in the same body, and yet they had. Why didn't he try again later? I asked, my voice shaking, once he was safe. Because there was no one to trust, Jennifer said. Caroline's father was a federal judge. Her uncle held a senior post in the Justice Department. She had allies in law enforcement, the FBI, even the courts. If he'd gone public, he'd have been dead within days, and the evidence destroyed. Her tone hardened. So he did the only thing that made sense. He vanished. He kept everything hidden and waited. Waited for what? For the world to change, she said simply. For the statutes on certain crimes to lapse. For the key players to die off. For the political tides to shift. And he waited for technology to catch up. For a time when the things he documented could actually be proven. Half of what's in this ledger would have been dismissed in 1982 as hearsay. But now, with digital forensics, global banking databases, financial transparency laws, this book is a nuclear weapon. My phone buzzed sharply against the wooden table, slicing through the air. I looked down. A new message. From Caroline. A video file. I pressed play, my fingers trembling. The image flickered to life. A dim warehouse, bare concrete walls, a single hanging bulb. Michael and Vanessa sat bound to chairs, both alive, both conscious, bruised, exhausted, but breathing. Michael's left eye was swollen. A thin line of blood traced the corner of Vanessa's mouth. "Mom," Michael said, his voice rough, breaking. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I didn't tell you sooner. Dad made me promise, but I should have." Someone off camera gestured sharply. He fell silent. "They said if you give them what they want, they'll let us go. Please, Mom, just do what they ask." The video jumped abruptly. A new feed, Emma, framed through a living room window, laughing, painting her friend's nails, completely unaware of the storm closing in around her. "See?" Caroline's voice slid through the speakers, cool and sharp as glass. "Everyone you love within my reach. The warehouse location will be sent within the hour. Come alone. Bring the documents. No tricks, or I start sending you pieces of your family." The screen went black. I stared at the phone until my reflection blurred in its dark surface. "She's insane," I whispered. "No," Jennifer said, fingers already flying across her laptop keys. "She's desperate." And that makes her worse. Lines of data filled the screen as Jennifer pulled up satellite maps, overlays, logistics, her face lit by the pale glow of the monitor. She spent 43 years holding together the illusion of respectability, married a diplomat, built charities, reinvented herself as the perfect socialite. But if this evidence comes out, she loses everything. Her fortune, her reputation, her freedom. She'll die in a cell. "Good," I said bitterly. Jennifer's head snapped up, her eyes hard. "You want revenge. I want justice." She studied me for a long moment, and then for the first time since we'd met, she smiled. A real smile, faint but alive. "Your husband said you'd say that. Said beneath all that gentleness and grace you had steel in your spine. He was proud of you, Mrs. Caldwell." Tears pricked my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. There would be time for mourning later. Right now, there was only purpose. "What's the plan?" I asked. "We go to the meeting," Jennifer said. "We bring the documents, or at least what looks like them. The originals stay here, locked away. If I don't check in every 12 hours, my firm has instructions to release everything publicly. She slid a manila folder across the table. Photocopies of the ledger's pages, indistinguishable from the real thing unless you knew where to look. These will do the job. You'll wear a recording device. We'll get Caroline on tape admitting everything. Once we have her confession, she hesitated only briefly. Torres and his team will move in. I leaned back slowly, piecing it together. You knew he was still alive. Jennifer gave a faint nod. I'm 63, not stupid, I said. You weren't worried about him at the farm, which means he was never in danger. He's out there now. Building a team, preparing to pull Michael and Vanessa out. Her mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. You catch on fast. What I don't understand, I continued, is why you need a confession. You have all the evidence right here. Jennifer's expression shifted, calm, professional, but suddenly guarded. Because this ledger implicates more than just Caroline, she said carefully. It names people who still hold power. Judges, politicians, corporate heads. They could bury this for decades with a single phone call. She tapped the folder. But a recorded confession from her? Caroline Pemberton Ashcroft, the beloved philanthropist, the diplomat's widow, the symbol of integrity? That can't be silenced. That would make headlines. It would ignite investigations that even her allies couldn't stop. So I'm bait, I said. You're more than that, Jennifer replied. You're the one person who can push her over the edge, make her drop the mask, say too much, reveal what she's done. She despises you because you're living proof of the one thing she couldn't control. The man who escaped her. Jennifer closed her laptop, her eyes steady and unflinching. I won't lie to you, Brittany, she said quietly. This is dangerous. The kind of dangerous you don't walk away from unchanged. Caroline's unstable, Jennifer said quietly, and desperate people make unpredictable choices. If you want to back out, if you'd rather turn everything over to the FBI and hope they do the right thing, I'll understand. I sat in silence for a moment, staring down at my hands. Then my mind filled with images of Robert, younger, stronger, cornered in that Boston apartment all those years ago, facing death and choosing to run. I thought about the decades he'd spent hiding behind a name that wasn't his, carrying the weight of fear every day, protecting a truth that had nearly destroyed him. And I thought about the life he'd still managed to give me, the laughter, the quiet mornings, the love that had been real even if the past behind it wasn't. I'm not backing out, I said finally. My voice didn't shake. When do we leave? Dawn, Jennifer replied. They'll send the location in about an hour. That gives us time to get ready. She crossed the room to a narrow closet I hadn't noticed before and opened it. Inside was an array of equipment that looked straight out of an intelligence briefing. Micro cameras, earpieces, encrypted transmitters, GPS trackers. Your husband left all of this here, she said. He prepared for the possibility we might need it. I gave a faint, incredulous laugh. He really did think of everything. Jennifer's expression shifted. Something sharp flickered across her features, a shadow of regret. Almost everything, she said softly. He didn't plan on dying before he could finish this himself. I looked up. He planned to reveal everything eventually? Yes, on your 50th wedding anniversary, she said. That was the timeline he'd set. By then, most of the people involved would have been gone, or too old to fight back effectively. It would have been the perfect moment to go public. But Caroline got impatient, I murmured. She got a tip, Jennifer corrected. Someone, we still don't know who, told her that James Whitmore might still be alive, living under another name somewhere in Pennsylvania. She started digging, hired private investigators, and after 3 years they found Robert Caldwell, a man with no past before 1982, no family history, no traceable record. It took time, but they found him. My throat tightened. And killed him. Jennifer shook her head. We don't think so. The autopsy shows his heart attack was real, but the stress he was under, knowing they were closing in, realizing the countdown had begun, that may have pushed him over the edge. She turned back to the table, sorting through the devices with methodical precision. After he died, Caroline waited. She wanted to see if the evidence would resurface, if he'd left anything behind. She's been patient for 2 years, but now that she knows you have the box, she's done waiting. When nothing surfaced, she assumed you were in the dark, Jennifer said, but as the 2-year mark came closer, she started to panic. What if Robert had left instructions? What if you were about to find out everything he'd hidden? So she made her move first, I nodded slowly. And in doing it, she finally slipped, Jennifer finished. After 43 years of control, she exposed herself. My phone buzzed. Both of us looked down at the screen. A message. Coordinates. Abandoned textile mill outside Harrisburg. I read aloud. 40 miles out. Jennifer checked her own device. That's one of the old Whitmore plants. It's been closed since the 90s. Empty, isolated. Perfect place for her to stage this. She gave a humorless half smile. Fitting, isn't it? The empire collapsing where it all began. The next hour passed in a blur of precision. Jennifer worked quickly, fitting a concealed transmitter beneath my jacket, testing the mic, adjusting the placement for clarity. I repeated the lines she gave me until my voice stopped trembling. Remember, she said, tucking a final wire into my collar. Caroline's built her entire life around one belief, that she was wronged, that James betrayed her, ruined her family, destroyed her future. You need to shatter that illusion. Push her until the truth slips out. And if she just shoots me instead? I asked. Jennifer's eyes didn't flinch. Torres will be in position with his team. The building will be surrounded. If she fires, they move. She hesitated before adding, but I won't pretend there isn't a gap, a few seconds between her decision and their response. If you're doing this, you'll have to be sharp. Don't give her a clean shot. Don't let her corner you. I gave a wry smile. I've survived 63 years on a farm, Jennifer. I can handle one bitter old woman. She's not old, Jennifer said softly. She's our age, and she's killed before. That stopped me cold. What? The investigators who got too close, Jennifer said. Every one of them. Accidents, suicides, disappearances. All tracing back to her. She's ruthless, Brittany. You need to remember that when you walk into that mill. 3 of them, Jennifer said quietly. Across 3 decades, each one made to look routine. A car crash, a sudden cardiac arrest, a mugging gone wrong. Different methods, different cities, same result. Her jaw tightened. Torres dug deep. All 3 deaths trace back to Caroline. She's not just vindictive, Brittany. She's a serial killer who stayed one step ahead of justice for almost 50 years. Don't underestimate her. I swallowed hard, the taste of fear sharp at the back of my throat, and nodded. Then we'd better make sure this works. We left the cabin at 5. The world was still dark, wrapped in heavy silence, the road ahead barely visible in the beam of the headlights. Jennifer drove with steady hands, her focus absolute, but I saw the tightness in her shoulders, the way her eyes flicked to the mirrors every few seconds. How long have you known? I asked after a while. About Robert. About any of this. She kept her gaze on the road. 5 years, she said. He came to me then. Said he needed an attorney with experience handling posthumous releases, files, evidence, personal instructions that would be triggered only after death. He was already sick, already aware that his heart wasn't going to last forever. He wanted a failsafe, someone he could trust to finish what he started if he couldn't. He was planning his own death, I murmured. No, Jennifer corrected softly. He was planning for every possibility, including the one where Caroline reached you before you reached the truth. She glanced at me then, her expression softening. He loved you, Brittany. I've worked with a lot of clients preparing their final affairs, but I've never seen anyone build such an intricate web of protection around one person. Lies, misdirection, false trails, all of it designed to keep you alive. And it worked, I said quietly. For 43 years, she agreed. Until now. Until now, I echoed. Jennifer gave a small nod, eyes returning to the road as the horizon began to gray with the first hint of dawn. But the woman sitting beside me isn't the one he left behind, she said. You're not the same as you were a week ago, not even the same woman you were yesterday. And for the first time, I realized she was right. You're the woman he always knew you could be, Jennifer said softly. We reached the old textile mill just as the eastern sky began to pale, that hollow hour before sunrise when the world looks drained of color, when even the living seem like ghosts. The building loomed against the horizon, 5 stories of decaying brick and shattered windows, its skeletal frame silhouetted in gray light. The chain-link fence surrounding it sagged in places, the metal rusted and broken. 3 vehicles waited in the cracked lot. The black SUV I recognized from the farm, a dark sedan, and a white van with tinted windows. That's a lot of people, I murmured, my mouth dry. Torres is here too, Jennifer said. You just can't see him. She handed me a small key fob, simple and unassuming. Panic switch. If anything goes wrong, press this. Don't think, don't wait, just press it. I nodded, tucking it into my coat pocket. Then I took the folder of copied documents and stepped out into the cold. The morning air smelled faintly of rust and old machinery. Somewhere far away, a train's whistle echoed through the stillness. The main door hung crooked on its hinges, yawning open like the mouth of something long dead. Inside, the air was damp and heavy, filled with the scent of mold and decay. Broken glass and gravel crunched beneath my shoes as I crossed the vast open floor, sunlight filtering through shattered windows in narrow, shifting beams. Mrs. Caldwell? Caroline's voice rang out, sharp and composed, echoing off the concrete walls. So nice of you to join us. Her voice came from above. Top floor. Take the stairs. The elevator hasn't worked in 20 years I started climbing. Each flight echoed beneath my feet, the sound hollow and rhythmic like a countdown. My heart pounded in my chest, every step taking me deeper into the snare. By the time I reached the 5th floor, my breath was steady. My fear hardened into something sharper. Resolve. They were waiting exactly as I'd expected. Michael and Vanessa sat bound to chairs in the center of the room, pale but alive, their eyes flicking toward me as I entered. 4 men in dark suits flanked them, impassive, disciplined, guns visible at their sides. And by the window, bathed in the cold light of dawn, stood Caroline Pemberton Ashcroft. Even now, she was stunning, the kind of beauty money and control preserved long after time should have dulled it. Her silver hair gleamed, her tailored coat fell in perfect lines. Her jewelry caught the morning light like frost, but her eyes, flat, unfeeling, were colder than steel. You have something of mine, she said, her tone smooth, almost bored. I met her gaze evenly. And you have something of mine, I replied, nodding toward Michael and Vanessa. Caroline smiled then, a small, deliberate curl of the lips that was somehow far more terrifying than anger could ever be. Fair enough, she said smoothly. The documents, please. I lifted the folder slightly but didn't hand it over. First, I said, my voice steady, I want to know why. Why any of this? Why try to kill him? Her expression didn't change. Because he was going to destroy everything, she said simply. My family. My name, my legacy. He wanted to play the hero, the noble whistleblower exposing the powerful Pembertons while I rotted in a cell. I couldn't let that happen, so you ordered his death. I ordered him to be taught a lesson, she corrected coolly. His death was supposed to come later, after he understood what defying me cost. The casual way she said it made my skin crawl. Murder, to her, was a management decision. But he ran, she went on, her tone sharpening, like a coward. He left me. Left us. Stole millions and vanished. Do you have any idea what that did to me? The humiliation? The whispers? Everyone thought he'd run off with some younger woman, that I wasn't enough. Do you know what that's like? Yes, I said quietly, because he saw who you really were. Her smile vanished. The muscles in her jaw tightened. Don't pretend you knew him, she hissed. You knew Robert Caldwell. A fake. A costume he put on to hide from who he was supposed to be. I knew James Whitmore, the real man, the man who was mine. The real man chose me, I said, stepping closer. Over you. Over his family. Over the life you built on blood and lies. Her face flickered. Anger, disbelief, something raw. He spent 43 years tracking every crime you committed, I continued, my voice low but unwavering. Every shell company, every payoff, every innocent person you destroyed to protect yourself. You think you've been hunting him all this time? I took another step forward, holding her gaze. He's been hunting you. Documenting everything, waiting for the moment you'd finally show your face. Waiting for the perfect moment to destroy you, I said. He's dead, Caroline spat, her voice rising for the first time. That moment died with him. Has it? I opened the folder and held up the first page of the ledger. Her signature glared up at her in Robert's precise documentation. Authorization for a transfer of cartel funds. Because it looks to me, I said evenly, like his moment is happening right now. For a heartbeat, her mask didn't slip. Then I saw it. A twitch in the corner of her mouth, her pupils contracting as she stared at the page. Arrogance gave way to confusion, confusion to disbelief, disbelief to dawning panic. That's not... Her voice faltered. I never signed... You signed it, I cut in. July 15th, 1982. 1 week before you sent your men to kill him. He photographed everything, logged every transaction, stored it all where you'd never find it. And now, I lifted my phone, it's about to go public. You're bluffing. Am I? I thumbed the screen, showing her the draft message open on my phone, addressed to the FBI, the Boston Globe, the Washington Post, each attachment clearly labeled. It's already written, I said quietly. All it takes is one button. The only question is whether you want the chance to explain yourself first. Explain myself. She laughed then, high, sharp, brittle, like glass fracturing under pressure. To you, you're nobody. A farmer's wife who spent her life play acting in someone else's story. You think you can judge me? I don't have to judge you, I said. The evidence already does. I took another step forward. We were close now. Close enough for me to see the tremor at the edge of her jawline, the sheen of sweat collecting along her perfect powdered forehead. But I do want to understand, I said softly. How did you become this? How did the woman James once loved enough to marry turn into a murderer? And there, in the split second between words, I saw it. The crack. Her right hand twitched toward her purse. The movement was too fast, too practiced to be anything but instinct, and I knew, with a cold, absolute certainty, that there was a gun inside, and she intended to use it. I knew then that I'd gone too far. My thumb hit the panic button. Everything that followed happened in a blur of movement and sound. Glass shattered inward as Torres and his team burst through the windows on ropes, black figures cutting through the pale dawn. They moved with terrifying precision. Controlled, efficient, silent, even amid chaos. Caroline's men reached for their guns, but they never got the chance to fire. Muzzle flashes lit the shadows for only seconds before each one was disarmed or down. Michael and Vanessa threw themselves sideways, still bound to their chairs, as bullets sparked against the old machinery. And then Caroline turned her gun on me. Her face twisted, rage, grief, something feral, and she screamed, "You took everything from me! He chose you instead of me." I didn't move, didn't even blink. My voice came out steady, cold, unshaken. "No," I said, "you took everything from yourself. The moment you chose money over love, the moment you chose murder over truth. James didn't leave you, Caroline. You destroyed him, and now you've destroyed yourself." Her finger twitched on the trigger. A single shot cracked through the air. For a heartbeat, I thought it was mine. But then Caroline staggered, clutching her shoulder as the gun clattered across the floor. Torres appeared beside me, weapon raised, his face hard and focused. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded, though my knees suddenly felt like water. "They're safe," he said, jerking his head toward Michael and Vanessa. "We've got them." He kicked Caroline's gun away and pulled a pair of zip ties from his belt, binding her wrists with practiced efficiency. "And we got it all," he added. "The confession, the threats." Every word behind him, Jennifer stepped into the room, flanked by 2 agents in FBI jackets. Her voice was calm, controlled, deadly certain. "Caroline Pemberton Ashcroft, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, money laundering, witness intimidation, and about 40 other charges we'll cover in detail." Later, Caroline sat slumped against the wall, blood blooming through her designer blouse, her flawless hair in disarray. The mask she'd worn for 43 years was gone. She looked up at me, her eyes hollow, her voice raw. "You've won," she said bitterly. "Congratulations. You get to be the widow of a hero, and I get to be the villain of the story." "How fair," Caroline hissed, her voice dripping with bitterness. "Fair?" I knelt beside her, close enough to smell the faint trace of perfume beneath the copper scent of blood. When I spoke, my voice was steady, calm, but carved from steel. "My husband spent 43 years in hiding because of you. He died without ever being able to speak his own name, without ever seeing his family, without ever living as himself. You stole that from him, from me, from our children." Her eyes flickered, some final spark of defiance giving way to something that looked almost like regret. "So no, Caroline," I said quietly, "this isn't about fair. This is about justice." Finally, I rose and turned away. Torres's men were cutting the ropes that held Michael and Vanessa, their hands shaking but alive. I crossed the floor and gathered my son into my arms. He clung to me like a child again, trembling. "Mom," he whispered hoarsely, his voice breaking. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." I stroked his hair, breathing in the familiar scent, the warmth of life. "It's over now," I said softly. "It's finally over." But even as I said the words, watching the FBI lead Caroline Pemberton Ashcroft away in cuffs, I knew it wasn't truly over. The danger was gone, but the questions remained. Questions that would haunt me long after the headlines faded. Because as the sun rose over the shattered mill, one truth cut through everything else. Who had I really been married to for 43 years? And could I ever forgive him for the lifetime of lies that built our love? 3 months later, I stood in my farmhouse kitchen, pouring coffee as the morning light spilled gold across the fields. The world had gone quiet again. Michael and Vanessa had returned home 2 weeks earlier, finally believing it was safe. Emma had stayed with me for a few days afterward, curious, resilient, her child's heart trying to make sense of everything. How do you explain to a 12-year-old that her grandfather had lived and died under a name that wasn't his, that truth and love can exist in the same heart, that sometimes good men lie for reasons that are hard to forgive? You tell her the truth, I decided. You tell her that people are complicated, that love isn't always clean or simple, that her grandfather had loved her with all his heart, even if his name was never really Robert Caldwell. She'd hugged me then, fierce and small and brave, and said, "Grandma, you're braver than Captain Marvel." I'd laughed through my tears and told her I was just stubborn. The headlines had faded by then, but the story hadn't. The criminal cases against Caroline and her surviving associates had shaken Boston's old money circles, dragging decades of privilege and corruption into the light. And though justice had finally come, peace, true peace, still felt like something I had to learn all over again. Boston philanthropist arrested in 40-year money laundering scheme, declared the New York Times. Diplomat's widow linked to multiple murders, announced the Washington Post. Each morning brought new headlines, new revelations, as prosecutors combed through every page of Robert's painstaking records. Caroline's descent was as predictable as it was tragic. First an insanity plea, then a failed suicide attempt, and finally a stony silence interrupted only by bitter outbursts about betrayal and injustice. Her trial was set for spring. When her attorneys asked if I would testify, I said yes. I owed Robert that much. The doorbell rang, cutting through my thoughts. Outside, through the frost-blurred glass, I spotted Jennifer Matsumoto's unassuming gray sedan. In the strange calm that followed everything, we'd become a kind of family, joined by survival, by grief, by truths we could never unlearn. "I brought bagels," she said when I opened the door, lifting a paper sack with a smile that almost reached her eyes. "And I've got news." We sat at the kitchen table, the same one where, just a few months earlier, I'd first spread out the contents of Robert's box. It was January now. Snow blanketed the fields, soft and clean, the world remade in white. "The federal investigations widened," Jennifer began, sliding a neat stack of documents from her briefcase with her usual precision. "So far, 14 indictments, including 2 sitting congressmen and a former cabinet secretary. The Justice Department's calling it the biggest financial crime prosecution in decades. Because of Robert," I said quietly. "Because of James," she corrected gently. "We should start calling him by his real name." He earned that back. I cradled my mug, letting the heat seep into my palms. "I've thought about that," I said, "about names and truth and the parts of ourselves we choose to keep. The man who died out there in the North Pasture, he was Robert Caldwell. He'd been Robert longer than he'd ever been James Whitmore. That's the man I knew. That's who he chose to be." Jennifer considered that for a long moment, then nodded. "Fair enough. Robert, it is." She took another sip of coffee, then added, "There's something else. The Whitmore family wants to meet you. James's, that is. His younger sister, Margaret. She's 70 now, lives up in Maine." "She never believed her brother was gone," Jennifer said softly. "For years she searched for him on her own, hired investigators, followed dead leads, refused to hold a funeral. When she finally learned the truth, she cried for 3 straight days. She reached into her briefcase and produced an envelope, heavy cream stationery, handwritten in neat cursive. She'd like to visit, if you're open to it. No pressure, no expectations. She just wants to hear about his life, the one he built for himself." I took the letter carefully, my fingers trembling just a little. A sister. Robert had a sister, a whole piece of his past I'd never known existed. More family, more threads in the story of a man who'd hidden everything and everyone to protect me. "I'll think about it," I said quietly. "There's something else," Jennifer said, and I saw a flicker of satisfaction cross her face. "The money. The $20 million Robert moved offshore?" She nodded. "It's still there. Has been for 43 years. Untouched, steadily accruing interest. With your legal position, and given that Robert was both heir to a portion of the Whitmore estate and acting to expose criminal conduct, the accounts are lawfully yours." I stared at her. $20 million? "Closer to 60 now," she said evenly. "Compound interest, smart placements. He was very deliberate about where he moved it." The number felt impossible. Too big to mean anything real. "I don't want it," I said finally. "It's tainted." That money destroyed people's lives. That's exactly why you should take it, Jennifer said, her voice steady and sure, because Robert left instructions. If the funds were ever recovered, he wanted them to serve a purpose, to help victims of financial crimes, to support whistleblowers and their families, to fund investigations into corruption. He even wrote the framework himself. She slid another document across the table, bound, official, already in motion. The Robert Caldwell Foundation for Financial Justice, she said. All it needs is your approval. I looked down at the papers, at Robert's careful handwriting in the margins, at the dream he'd never lived to see, and felt something uncoil inside me. For the first time since this began, the weight I'd been carrying started to lift. Yes, I whispered, then said it again with certainty. Yes, I agree. We spent the next hour at the kitchen table, working through the details. Board structure, mission statements, legal charters, and the first slate of grants the foundation would fund. Jennifer had anticipated everything. She'd already filed preliminary paperwork, spoken to accountants, even identified potential trustees. By the time she packed her briefcase to leave, the Robert Caldwell Foundation for Financial Justice existed not just as an idea, but as something real, something living, a legacy born from decades of silence and sacrifice. When her car disappeared down the snowy road, I pulled on my coat and walked out to the barn. The January air was sharp and clean, the kind that burned in your lungs and made you feel alive. My boots crunched through the thin crust of snow, and the barn door groaned in familiar protest as I pushed it open. The smell hit me. Hay, oil, dust, old wood, thyme. It was the smell of our life. The smell of mornings spent feeding animals, of autumn harvests, of laughter echoing across rafters that had seen more seasons than I could count. This was where he'd proposed, 41 years ago, kneeling in worn work clothes with a ring he'd saved for by selling a tractor. I stood in the same spot now, breath trembling in the cold air. Was any of it real? I asked softly, my words fading into the quiet. Did you love me? Or was I just part of the disguise? It wasn't the first time I'd asked that question. I'd whispered it into the dark so many nights since October that it had become a kind of prayer, trying to reconcile the two men who had shared one life, Robert, the gentle farmer, James, the fugitive heir. But today, I finally knew the truth. It had all been real. Robert hadn't chosen this life because he had to. He'd chosen it because he wanted it. He could have fled anywhere, lived rich, anonymous, untouchable. But he'd chosen me, chosen this farm, this town, this small, honest existence where love meant early mornings and tired smiles and coffee on the porch at sunset. His lies had been about who he'd been, never about who he became. The man I'd known, the man I'd loved, was no disguise. Robert Caldwell was as true as any name could ever be. I heard footsteps crunching behind me and turned. Daniel Torres was crossing the yard, breath fogging in the cold, his hands shoved deep in his coat pockets. "Thought I might find you out here," he said with a faint smile. We'd seen each other a few times since the rescue. Official debriefs, legal meetings, moments when silence said more than words. But this visit felt different. We'd both spent months buried in aftermath. Police statements, sworn depositions, endless interviews with prosecutors and federal agents. But this was the first time Torres had come to the farm simply to visit. No forms, no briefcase, no agenda. Just him. "How's Ben Morrison?" I asked, grateful for the small talk. Torres smiled. "Last I heard, he's been holding court at the diner, retelling the story to anyone who'll listen. Says he's thinking about writing a memoir, The Night I Saved Brittany Caldwell from the Boston Mob." I laughed, shaking my head. "They weren't actually mob." "He knows," Torres said, still grinning, "but it sounds better on paper." The laugh felt strange in my throat, unfamiliar but clean, the kind of sound I hadn't made in months. Maybe, I thought, One day I'd be able to remember all of it without the tight knot of fear and grief that still lived in my chest. Torres's smile faded. His voice softened. "There's something I wanted to tell you. About your husband. About the man I got to know through the investigation. You never actually met him," I said quietly. "No," he admitted. "But I read everything he wrote. Every journal entry, every note, every file he left behind. I talked to everyone who'd ever known him as Robert Caldwell, and after 3 years of trying to understand the choices he made, I think I finally do." He looked out over the white fields stretching beyond the barn. "He was remarkable, Brittany. Not just for his intelligence, though he was one of the sharpest minds I've ever studied, not even for his courage. What made him extraordinary was that he kept choosing the harder road. When it came down to justice or safety, truth or comfort, he always picked justice. Always. It cost him everything he'd been born with." Torres turned back to me. "But it gave him something better. He got a real life, a family, peace, 43 years of it. And he knew he'd done the right thing, even if the world never learned his name again." My throat tightened. The air burned in my lungs, colder now, heavier. "He told Jennifer once," Torres went on, "that his biggest fear wasn't being caught. It was that someday you'd have to find out, that the truth would hurt you." Tears welled and froze against my cheeks. "I wish I could tell him I understand now," I whispered, "that I forgive him." Torres gave a faint, knowing smile. "He knew, Brittany. The way he wrote about you, the way he planned everything to keep you safe. He knew." Emma couldn't stop talking about the horses, about joining 4-H, about how she'd help me feed the chickens when she came to live here in March. Michael and Vanessa wanted time to get settled, to ease the transition before planting season began. It felt right, natural, like the farm was waiting for them. After we ended the call, I walked through the house slowly, touching familiar things as though seeing them for the first time. The worn banister Robert had sanded smooth decades ago, the curtains I'd sewn one quiet winter, the kitchen table that had borne everything from birthday cakes to grief. For so long, I'd seen these rooms as relics of a life that had ended. But now, with Michael coming home and Emma's laughter echoing again in my imagination, the house felt alive. Not a monument to loss, but a place ready to be lived in. Later that night, I opened the drawer of my bedside table and took out Robert's letter, the same one I'd first pulled from the wooden box that had upended everything I believed about my life. The paper was soft now from handling, the edges worn. I read it one more time. Slowly, deliberately. "Brittany, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I'm sorry for the secrets. I'm sorry for the lies. But most of all, I'm sorry for what you're about to discover. Our life together was real. My love for you was real. But my past was someone else's entirely. Burn everything in this box after you've read it. Trust no one. And whatever you do, don't let them know you know. Your life may depend on it. R." I'd done none of the things he'd asked. I hadn't burned the evidence. I hadn't hidden the truth. I'd done the opposite. Exposed it to the world. And somehow, we'd survived. Justice had been served, not because I'd obeyed his warnings, but because I'd refused to be afraid. For a moment, I held the letter over the fireplace, the edge catching the glow of the flames. It would take only a second. One flick of the wrist, and it would all be gone. The last physical tie to that night, to the fear, the deception, the unraveling of everything I thought I knew. But I didn't let go. Instead, I folded it gently along the same creases and carried it upstairs. I placed it in my jewelry box, beside my wedding ring and the gold locket Robert had given me on our 20th anniversary, not as a token of pain, but as a keepsake of truth. Proof that love can hold its contradictions, that two things can exist at once: deception and devotion, grief and gratitude, endings and beginnings. and as the wind rattled softly against the windows, I felt certain of one thing. Love, even fractured by lies, had still been real. A person can be two things at once: saint and sinner, hero and fugitive, husband and stranger. I'd spent a lifetime learning that truth, but now I understood the last part of it too. Sometimes, the greatest act of love is allowing someone to be complicated. Spring came early that year, soft rain and warm light coaxing life from the soil before winter had truly let go. By April, Michael and his family had moved into the renovated guest cottage on the east side of the property. Close enough for laughter and help, but far enough that we each had space to breathe. We planted corn and soybeans side by side, the same way Robert and I once had. Michael learned the rhythms of the land, the patient cadence of work that doesn't yield to deadlines or ambition. Emma followed behind us in her muddy boots, asking 1,000 questions about seeds and roots and how something small could become something so strong. Watching her, I realized the farm had become what Robert always meant it to be, not a hiding place, but a beginning. Margaret Whitmore arrived in May. She was elegant with silver-streaked hair and the same piercing eyes her brother once had, the same smile that could melt ice and still carry secrets. She brought a stack of photo albums tied with faded ribbon, pictures of a little boy named James playing in summer fields, laughing on the deck of a sailboat, studying by candlelight, the boy who'd become my husband. He was always brave, Margaret told me over tea in the kitchen, too brave for his own good sometimes. He couldn't stand cruelty. Even as a child, he'd step between a bully and a victim without thinking. It cost him peace, friends, safety. But he couldn't be any other way. I swallowed hard. He never mentioned you. She smiled sadly. I know that must hurt. But he was protecting me. If Caroline or her people had known he had a sister he loved, I'd have been a target. He chose silence to keep me safe. Margaret reached across the table and took my hand. He gave up everything. His name, his past, his family. But he gained you, and this place, and your children. Looking around this house, I can see it was worth the price we cried together then. Two women mourning the same man from opposite ends of his story. When she left, I felt something settle in me. Not peace exactly, but wholeness. The foundation opened in June, the Robert Caldwell Foundation for Financial Justice. We funded 3 investigations into corporate corruption, helped 12 families rebuild after being stripped of everything by fraud, and launched a scholarship for the children of whistleblowers. The board met in the farmhouse, the long table once used for family dinners now scattered with legal files and mission statements. I watched Robert's vision turn into something living, a legacy of truth instead of secrecy. Caroline's trial began in July. For 3 weeks, I sat in the courtroom watching the past unfold under fluorescent lights. Documents, testimonies, wire transfers, deaths. Caroline never looked at me, not once. I looked at her, though, and I didn't see the villain anymore. I saw a woman who had traded everything human in her for the illusion of power. When the guilty verdict was read, I felt no satisfaction, only a quiet sadness for everyone the story had broken. For Caroline, for James, for all the lives that had spun out from their collision. Outside the courthouse, a reporter pushed a microphone toward me. "Mrs. Caldwell, how do you feel?" I thought for a moment before answering. "I feel like justice was served," I said, "and I feel grateful that I get to go home to a life that's real." By August, the farm was alive again. The air hummed with insects, the fields gold and green under the late summer sun. Michael worked beside me in the rows, his shirt damp with sweat and pride. Emma learned to drive the tractor, shrieking with delight as the engine rattled to life. Vanessa marked lesson plans at the kitchen table, her laughter carrying out through the open windows. The rhythm of life returned. Work and rest, planting and harvest, endings and beginnings. And for the first time in a long time, it felt like the world had finally found its balance. One evening, as the sun sank low over the cornfields, painting the world in a soft shimmer of gold and green, Emma turned to me and asked if I was happy. I didn't answer right away. I thought about everything that had unraveled and everything that had taken root again in its place. The losses, the betrayals, the revelations that had both broken and rebuilt me. After a long pause, I said, "Yes, I think I am. Not despite what happened, but because of it." I drew her close, feeling the warmth of her small frame against me. "Your grandfather once taught me that no matter what life takes from us, we can survive if we're brave enough to face the truth. And the most important truths are often the simplest ones. Love is real, family matters, and home is wherever we decide to make it." She leaned against me, her head resting on my shoulder, and together we watched the sun melt into the horizon. 3 generations stood there, past, present, and future, on land that had once been built on deception, but now thrived on truth. In that moment, I understood what Robert had always known. We are not the sum of our secrets, but the proof of how we choose to live beyond them. Our past does not imprison us. Our choices set us free. And love, flawed, messy, unconditional love, remains the only truth worth holding on to. The farm would endure, the foundation would keep growing, and my family would continue to heal. As for me, I would live out the rest of my days not as the woman who had been lied to, but as the woman who had learned that strength isn't the absence of breaking. It's the courage to rebuild again and again. Robert had shown me that. James had shown me that. The man I'd loved, however many names he'd carried, had left me with one final gift, the certainty that I was capable of far more than I had ever believed. Later, I stood alone on the porch, watching the fireflies flicker over the darkening fields like fallen stars. The night was still, the air soft against my skin, and I whispered into the quiet, "Thank you. Thank you for the lies that kept me alive, for the truth that set me free, for 41 years of imperfect, undeniable love, for teaching me that sometimes the bravest thing we can ever do is live honestly." The fireflies lifted into the air, glowing like tiny beacons, and for one fleeting moment, I let myself believe he could hear me. Then I turned, stepped inside the farmhouse, my home, my sanctuary, my legacy, and closed the door on the past. The future waited just beyond it, and for the first time in a very long while, I was ready to meet it. Now tell me, what would you have done if you were in my place? Let me know in the comments, and thank you for listening. Don't forget to check out the next story on your screen. I think it just might surprise you.